Hey guys, this is Keith. I'm coming at you today on video as well as audio, trying to add a visual element to my podcast, Key Thinking. Today I'm talking about something called cancel culture, and maybe this discussion will get broader about other cultural, political issues that I'm thinking about right now. There's this weird phenomenon, not cancel culture itself, which is weird enough, but it's denial. People saying that it doesn't exist. And I think this is a really strange thing that's happening. Cancel culture is a phenomenon that describes, well, it's a phrase that describes a phenomenon, which is a series of firings and deplatformings that are happening throughout, specifically America. And I'm going to use some visuals here since I'm coming at you from my computer. So there's this Twitter account called the Free Speech Union that I follow. They've been compiling a lot of these, but then I also found this website on the National Review, the Cancel Counter. What are we up to now today? 92. So this is just a random one, for instance. Catherine Room, the president and lead executive officer of the Canadian company Technical Safety BC, has taken it upon herself to remove chief from the label chief executive officer because the word is racist and offensive to Indigenous people. So this is not a canceling of a person, but just of an idea. Cancel culture can describe more broadly people changing language, which is like kind of more to the point of what I'm thinking about these days, which is thought policing and the Overton window becoming smaller and smaller. The Overton window describes this idea in the world that what you're allowed to think and say only exists between my hands here. So like, like the topic of food, like we can debate veganism, vegetarianism, and eating meat. Those are the parameters of the discussion of food. But when you talk about eating meat, you can talk about eating chicken and turkey, but you can't talk about eating owls. And you definitely cannot talk about eating baby humans. This would be outside the Overton window, outside the like common discourse of what's acceptable. And the only reason that that's strained is because if you're a philosophically minded person, maybe you would consider eating different things, not actually because you want to, but because you're wondering why certain things are edible and others aren't. And this applies across the board. So now politically, for instance, in the Black Lives Matter movement, the Overton window has shrunk dramatically, right? Even saying all lives matter falls outside that window. You're not allowed to say that. And there are examples. I think it might even be example number 1 or 2. If I scroll all the way down here. If I look at, Li Fang was number 1. That's a reporter with an interesting story. David Shore, number 2. Grant Napier was fired from his job as a radio host on the station and resigned as a play-by-play announcer for the Sacramento Kings after receiving backlash for tweeting "All Lives Matter," every single one. So that's not only controversial, but cancelable. Why? Why might that be something he can be fired for or, forced to resign from? And there's another phrase that I'll drop here, which is a dog whistle. A dog whistle is this kind of new lingo to describe, one would accuse Grant Napier in this case of dog whistling to white supremacists and racists. When you say all lives matter, what you're really saying is white power, white supremacy, Black lives don't matter, even though explicitly it does say all lives, every single one. And it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs. I don't know anything about Grant Napier, despite growing up hearing him announce Kings games in Sacramento. Um, Maybe he is racist. I don't know. Maybe he's a bad person to work with. I have no idea. A friend of mine defended his canceling on the basis that he probably was a bad guy and now is just a good opportunity to fire him. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But it is weird that this is the reason given officially, that it happens right after he says this. I mean, if he's being a jerk around the office, fire him for that reason and make the public statement about that. But no, it's about all lives matter, which is considered a dog whistle to the radical right. I'm going to talk about this more, so I'll hide that. It's a little weird for me to look at it. What's going on here? Well, we have a lot of weird terms. Cancel culture, which Fox News is running with, and because they're running with it in partisan politics, that means the left has to renounce it as a thing. So leftists and the New York Times say that it doesn't even exist, that you're describing something that's not real, and that if it is real, it's justified. You see that a lot, which is funny. This is all jargon. This is all playing with language and contorting language for power. And we're watching a power grab, essentially, of woke leftists versus, quote, mainstream, whatever that is. From what I can tell, woke leftists quite run mainstream culture. They certainly run the major publications and outlets and platforms like Facebook and Google and Twitter. So it's a little unclear what we're rebelling against right now. Supposedly, it's simply a racist heritage, a history of white supremacy. By the way, I saw on Twitter today, how do I show this stuff? If I go to my profile, will it show my likes or something? I'll bring this back up, I guess. Yeah, let's see if you can hear this guy. This is kind of insane.
In Illinois. So today, I'm calling for the abolishment of history classes in Illinois. We're concerned that current school history teachings lead to white privilege and a racist society. I'm calling on the State Board of Education to end the teaching of history and the local school districts to take immediate action by removing the current history books and curriculum practices that unfairly communicate our history until a suitable alternative is developed. So today...
Yeah, he's literally advocating canceling history or history classes. That's pretty rich. I think that it goes without saying the common wisdom, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I don't really understand the goal of erasing history, but given that it's triggering to study the brutality throughout history, and not just in America or via the Atlantic slave trade, but throughout the entire world always, it's a little crazy to me. But that's kind of the world that we're living in. Hope to God and goodness that this fails, because canceling history is a terrible idea. I think that should go without saying. History classes, I should say. Where am I going with all this? We're in this kind of modern age of disinformation and confusion. And I think most people are especially confused at the moment about all this language that's being changed, what racism means, what sexism is, what feminism is. By the way, I've taken a test on feminism and whether or not I am a feminist. So look forward to that podcast dropping in the future. Interesting results. So I'm talking about cancel culture specifically right now because I think uh, it's a scary thing. And I think I'm fortunate not to be cancelable. I don't have a loud voice. I don't have a major following. I don't have an employer that can fire me for saying the wrong things. So I'm in a good position, kind of. I mean, I'm in kind of a very, I I'm not in a privileged position. I just happen not to have any power that can be canceled. Um, so I feel like I should use that freedom like a shopping cart, NoFX would say, a punk rock kind of freedom that gives me, that affords me the ability to speak without major consequence. And I stress major, there are consequences. I can lose friendships, I can lose business connections. Um, but for what? What am I saying that's so radical that people would want to disassociate from me about? I don't hold extreme beliefs at all. I just think that it is extreme to judge other people on their skin, to judge yourself on your skin, to see the world through isms, and to live in this radicalized way of having to smash the state because of past grievances. I think that's radical, and I don't want to be radicalized in that way. So I've been resisting it. Yeah, what can I say about that? But I'm studying it. I'm watching what's happening in culture, and I find it fascinating. It's scary, but it's fascinating. And I think this idea of language is at the bottom of it. There's this sense that silence equals violence, which doesn't even make sense. There's this idea that actual violence, like destroying property and harassing people in cars and a lot of the behaviors of Antifa and a lot of these marches, which are turning more violent. Actually, maybe we'll look at that because it's been something I've been wanting to share. That these things aren't violent, but that your silence is, or that your speech is violent if it offends certain people. This is kind of crazy. This is kind of Orwellian in the sense that words don't mean what they're supposed to mean. We're now living in this era where words are, it's almost like the opposite of what things are supposed to mean. It's a little hard, I have to say. It's a little hard to do this on video. But anyways, I want to show you this Twitter account because this guy has been covering the Antifa and Portland protests. Let's see if I can do this a little better. Whoa. This is a little difficult. Can I center this? Come on, Keith. Are attacking an Amazon store again in Seattle. Using sledgehammers. Been rioting for hours. Okay, so this is happening. I don't know if mainstream media is covering this. So for people that only see mainstream media, I think this might be interesting to see. Looters walking around calmly with stolen merchandise in Chicago last night. Let's just look at a couple of these things that he's showing. It's a little disturbing, in my opinion. Looters broke into a Chicago mall and are looting the place clean. Bill-inspired rioting and looting in Chicago happened because people on social media falsely claimed Chicago PD had killed a black child. America is quickly becoming like the third world where mere online rumors mobilize violent mobs. That seems to be true. Chicago police. This is an example of blatant misinformation being shared. The shooting offender is a 20-year-old man who is currently being treated at a local hospital. So disinformation, guys. We're living in this age. Very shiny on camera. After breaking the Starbucks and Chase Bank, Antifa and Seattle are smashing up the Whole Foods grocery store tonight. They use hammers to break windows one by one. Antifa stands for anti-fascist, and a lot of people, my friends included, will say, well, what's wrong with being anti-fascist? How can you not be on that side of it? And that's true superficially, but it ignores a lot of what's really going on. Antifa is an example of a problem or of a solution without a problem. There is not fascism in the USA. We talk about it, we fear it from Trump and the right wing. But Antifa is the one using tactics that I would maybe describe as fascist, and they justify those tactics because when you make your enemy clear, when you define your enemy, which is so neocon, it's what Bush and Cheney were doing. When you define your enemy like fascism or racism, then you start slowly justifying anything against that enemy. That's what Hitler did. So when you say punch a Nazi, and if Richard Spencer is a Nazi, and you say, well, these are abhorrent beliefs that Richard Spencer holds, so he deserves to be punched in the face. Once you say that, and once you convince people of that through humor or anything else, then you've allowed violence. And now what's to stop you from calling the next person a Nazi? You know, like, how does it stop? So that's kind of the tactics going on here. Wow, aftermath of one area looted in Chicago last night. It's also proven that looting like this, wow, it hurts communities. It should be obvious that that's the case. I'm more mindful. This is kind of gut-wrenching to look at, but it gets worse. Looter uses vehicle to break into a business in Chicago. Okay, so this was Chicago. I thought we were going to be looking at Portland because that's what I had been following Andy with. I'm going to skip some of this. As Portland experiences more than 70 days of violent protests, riots, arson attacks, soaring homicides, and shootings, Washington Post actually published a glowing photo essay on Antifa riot fashion. Wow. What is wrong with this reporter and editors? Yeah. I mean, isn't that weird? I mean, I want to reveal the way that media works on our brains. And we're living in an age of very immature and reckless consumption of news. What we call news and how we consume it through channels designed to sell ad space with us as the product, basically. And it's very dangerous. And I'm not sure what you know about Antifa, but it's nothing to celebrate fashionably. But it is fashionable. It's just the way it is. Moira Vandewalker, 25, was arrested. She was charged with felony, riot, and more. She's an Antifa militant from the Bay Area. She was previously profiled in a news report about her extreme Antifa militantism. A heavyset female looter tries to escape from police but trips and falls. Maybe that's mean-spirited. Skip that one. Mass chaos in downtown Chicago. Michael Torres was arrested and charged with multiple offenses at the Portland Antifa riot. Michelle Torres, protest medic who has been helping rioters. She has GoFundMe. Sorry about this video, guys. This visual. Deciding on police union. They immediately began blocking the street with fire. Another Antifa radical profile. Okay, so Andy is profiling this. Okay, what's this one? Portland tonight. Rioters set up blockades again and throw an explosive right in the middle of cops. I mean, it's hard to even fully comprehend what you're looking at when you look at this stuff, but to me it looks like a war zone. You know, it looks like a different country. More looting. What's this one? I'm a little afraid to watch these, you know? What the hell is going on here? It looks like a stolen car. Gunfire rings out on the streets of Chicago during the Black Lives Matter riot overnight. Looters scatter the street. This is another conversation I've been getting in with Berliners. This is such a difficult topic to discuss, like the rate of crime committed, and what to do about that. Wow, a lot of mall looting. Portland police. Participants in the riot have returned to North Lombard Street at West Fenwick. Your orders are dispersed. Antifa have broken into the Capitol Hill Seattle Starbucks yet again and trashed the inside. I mean, okay. This is not the smoothest thing to be. Okay. I feel a little flush from looking at all that footage, and it just keeps going. I'm still looking at a lot of this, but what to say about all this? So there is a revolution happening in the world right now in the US, and it's not necessarily a good one. It's based on false pretenses. It's based on the idea that blacks are disproportionately killed by police, which is not true. Okay, it's true that they're disproportionately killed given their population, but it's not true based on how much crime is committed. And furthermore, well, let's just leave it. Even if black people might be disproportionately killed, what does that justify? What does it mean? Does it mean that we have to defund all police or abolish the police? Is that what that means? Is that what logically follows? Does it mean that we have to trash major cities? Does it mean that we have to replace our whole system with something more communist or more race-based in its applications? I mean, these are real questions that we're answering very mindlessly. We're going along with it, and I wonder why. I wonder why so few people stand up against this. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I don't really feel like saying too much more about all this. It's a little depressing, to be honest, and I don't really want to be engaging too much with it, but I want to talk about just some evidence for this idea of cancel culture and what's going on in terms of actual revolution. And it's happening in two ways. It's happening on the streets through the destruction of major cities and crime sprees. Crime is way up. Shootings are way up in New York. Killings are way up. Police are like on holiday. Who can blame them with all the negative sentiments toward them? And then we have it happening in what's called the managerial class, at the top of institutions. This is the editor's note. A wave of cancellations has swept the U.S. and Europe. Compiled here is a list of people, monuments, and artistic works that have been targets. The events are listed in reverse chronological order, although some incidents do overlap. The list will be updated as cancellations continue. I just want to go through a few of these more. At the University of Connecticut, the president and vice president of the undergraduate student government resigned recently for being white. The quote, "I feel that it is my duty to step down from my position to make space for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, voices to truly rise and be heard. It is my responsibility to make space, not to create an echo." Okay, so that's considered like proper now. Like that's what you're supposed to do if you're virtuous. Man, this website. I think my computer can't quite handle all this. Let's just go to some random ones. Okay, statues. I mean, Christopher Columbus was a very destructive force in society, so I can understand wanting to cancel Columbus Day and statues of him. But I do think it goes a little far when it's like George Washington. J.K. Rowling has defended herself against accusations of anti-transgender animus. Huge numbers of women are justifiably terrified by the trans activists. I know this because so many have got in touch with me to tell their stories. They're afraid of doxing, of losing their jobs or livelihoods, and of violence, Rowling wrote on her website on Wednesday. I refuse to bow down to a movement that I believe is doing demonstrable harm in seeking to erode women as a political and biological class and offering cover to predators like few before it. Rowling had criticized the use of the phrase people who menstruate in place of women. Yeah, people who menstruate. You know, the word woman has the word womb in it. But nonetheless, people think that J.K. Rowling is this transphobe, hateful, evil person for standing up for biological womanhood. I'll leave that for a separate podcast. Let me just cover a couple more of these that might stick out as I'm scrolling. Yeah, toppling statues of actual like Confederacy iconography doesn't really bother me at all, but I just wonder about the slippery slope of it. You know, trying to go into like Mount Rushmore and like attack that is a lot different. Yeah, Boston Mayor Marty Walsh is considering removing a statue of Abraham Lincoln with a freed slave after a resident filed an online petition that has garnered over 7,000 signatures. The statue shows Lincoln standing with an arm raised above the freed slave who is kneeling. It says that it's a statue that's supposed to represent freedom, but to me it represents submissiveness. Know your place because that's where you belong. All right, well, I can see that point. You know, it doesn't sound like the best artistic representation of Lincoln, but I also think it was probably appropriate for the moment. And that submissiveness, it could be like stand up now, which black people certainly have been doing, which is fine. But I think it's just important to like target the right things. Netflix has removed an episode of the 2015 sketch comedy series with Bob and David from its platform with blackface. Yeah. So Bob and David Cross, Bob Odenkirk, David Cross tweeted about it. Hey all, Netflix is going to pull this sketch from with Bob and David because the ridiculous, foolish character I play puts on blackface at one point. The point of this was to underscore the absurdity. Well, here's your last chance to figure it out. So David Cross is a leftist comic, leftist in the sense that most people in media are. He knows that blackface is not cool, and he plays absurd characters. He plays, idiots, etc., on purpose to highlight and mock them. But nonetheless, despite the context and the intent, just the mere idea of blackface is so anathema now that Netflix has to bow down to the woke mob, to use the pejorative phrase, and cancel it. In Berkeley, California, my alma mater, the Berkeley School District's board unanimously passed the resolution in support of Black Lives Matter after a push from BLM activists. The resolution will ultimately rename Jefferson and Washington elementary schools, which were designated in honor of the founding fathers. Noting the Black Lives Matter protests have swept the nation as demonstrators demand justice, initiate a school renaming process for Jefferson and Washington. Okay, so we're renaming schools for Black lives. I want to get to some actual people, but I think this is probably pretty boring. I'm trying to do this video. Let me hide this again. It's definitely harder than just doing a podcast into a microphone. It's harder to have my thoughts going. It's technologically difficult as well. I'm not even sure how this recording will turn out. And it's distracting to try and do the research live with you guys. It's easier to do that when I am just talking. But I don't know. You tell me what you think about this. Maybe I'll get better at it and keep it going. I might tool around with some other ideas that I have about adding a video component. So I'll leave it there for now. This is Keith thinking about the issues of the day, cancel culture, revolution, rioting in the streets, the protest movement, everything. Keep safe. Take care. And until next time, ciao.